This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
I just want to give people a platform to talk about themselves. I like to think that in 25 or 50 years, maybe their children or grandchildren or other loved ones can see their video of this person in the prime of their life and the prime of their career. And look at that crazy hairstyle. And can you believe that guy is wearing that? Just a different snapshot of how people lived, but also to see how fundraising was in the time that we're working in it versus in the future.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. This interview is part of the Career Curious series. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Tim Wilson, Prospect Management and Research Manager at Weber State University and founder of the People in Fundraising webcast. Hello, Tim. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Hi, Jen. Thank you very much for having me as a guest. I'm honored to be here. It's a real pleasure. So thank you.
I was out poking on your LinkedIn profile in prep for today, of course, and your career experience starts at Harvard Business School. Is that where it all began for you?
Career-wise, yes. I was just out of undergrad at UMass Amherst and thought I would work in a library at a college institution. So I was planning to go in that direction, but then realized, well, I was a history undergrad. I might want to get my master's in history. So through that, taking night courses at Harvard Extension School, someone very early on in 1999, so still in the 90s, said, if you get a full-time job anywhere at Harvard, they'll pay for most of the master's program. So that sounded really appealing to me, better than the money I would have allocated toward a library science degree. So really just right place, right time, could not have planned it or scripted it. I was a temp for a number of months in the fundraising department at HBS and was paired with a mobility impaired colleague, Paul Callahan, who had gone to Harvard and HBS. So I helped him a lot with office needs. And he saw some potential in me and lobbied to get me a longer term position there. And I loved that idea because I admired Paul. He was and is a man of faith and service and opportunities for people that have had really significant challenges like he has with spinal injuries. And I thought this would be great to work with Paul more. And then a few months later, also on that same team, a woman named Carrie Satano said, "Hey, Tim, they're hiring for a prospect researcher down the hall." And I knew nothing of prospect research. I mean, a lot of the fundraising was just new to me. So I talked to Val Roberts, longtime industry veteran in prospect research, and found that my skill set would resonate well with like a junior prospect researcher. So again, totally unscripted, just, happenstance. But I just think that making a good impression early on, dressing the part. I deliberately dressed up, even though I was, temping there and not full time. All those things contributed to creating an impression of, okay, he has no experience in prospect research, but has translatable skills and is willing to be a team player. So that's how it began. And I was there for 18 years. It was a great opportunity and I learned a lot. It was mostly reactive prospect research at the time, but worked on 2 campaigns, hundreds of colleagues over the years, and just a really awesome entree into nonprofit work.
And I think it was because you were channeling your inner librarian and it came out that, here is that skill set that's really going to do well.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something I try to convey to people, whether through my own podcast or conversations, is you don't necessarily have to go in that one direction, but looking for skills, personality fit, interests. For me, libraries, that's why I love working at a college or a university, and just that curiosity. I love walking into a library and thinking of all the people and all the time they spent writing these books. And it's just, it feels a very special place, no matter which library I go to. I just love it.
So, what led you to join Weber State University in 2021?
It's a great question, Jen. I'll try to be concise. So my wife is originally from northern Utah. And although we were living in Massachusetts, I was aware of Weber State because when we'd come to Utah, where I now live, to visit her family, Weber State was right up the road from my in-laws and other family members. So on many trips out here, I would make a point of networking with fundraising professionals of any role at the University of Utah and other institutions, Weber State as well. The state doesn't have nearly as many nonprofits, certainly higher education institutions as back east. So I was very deliberate at saying, I need to carve out some time because if we want to relocate here as a family at some point in the future, it'll behoove me to make those connections now. So when I stepped on that campus, I thought, oh my goodness, this campus at Weber State in Ogden, Utah, an old railroad town, reminds me so much of the campus that I grew up in my backyard with at Bridgewater State University in southeastern Massachusetts. My dad's worked there for 50 years. He's an alum of that alma mater, Bridgewater State, and it just felt like kind of a coming home in a way. And I thought, if I were to come to Utah and get a job in higher ed fundraising, this feels like it'd be really cool. But also as a public higher education alum with UMass Amherst, I really have felt and seen the value of public higher education and its generational impact. And so being able to give back in a way by working to find ways to support first generation students and other campus initiatives would be really meaningful from a career perspective. So flash forward to 2018, finally landed a job in Utah. After years of trying, I was recruited to Intermountain Healthcare Foundation in Salt Lake City by my friend Jason Beffert. And he was my manager at the foundation for about 9 months. And then he left to get a full-time remote job. And it threw me for a little bit, but I was able to then move into a higher role, backfill my position. Intermountain gave me great opportunities to become a leader, a manager of a team, and it certainly gave me exposure to healthcare fundraising, which I was very eager to diversify my career portfolio after almost 20 years at a private higher ed. So that was really beneficial. And the people were great. I loved the challenges of healthcare fundraising versus higher ed with HIPAA and certainly other limitations on what you can and cannot find and record and capture in the database. I also realized that I was much more extroverted than I imagined myself and just loved the chance to work with fundraisers across the state. They had fundraisers all the way to the Arizona border and up to Idaho, and I'd go to their offices quite a bit and in person meet with them, and that was really cool. Intermountain at the time was also very resistant to working from home, working remotely, unless I was visiting those sites. And my manager had left Intermountain for a full-time remote job. And I thought, I want to do that too. And this is all before the pandemic. So Weber State was always in the back of my mind, even after I arrived in Utah, because I thought it's closer to my home. It gets me that familiarity with college campus and the library that I love. And the public higher education sector would be another diverse setting to work in. So you get private higher ed, healthcare, public higher ed. What are the challenges involved with doing prospect development and overall fundraising for a public institution? Certainly the resource allocation is different for vendors and professional development. So I wanted that experience as well. It also meant that I would be a single contributor. There was no one else on the team, which again, I like to challenge myself. And I thought, I'm choosing to go from managing a team of great people to being a one-person show. What's that going to be like? What will be hard about it? What will be interesting about it? But again, from that career diversity perspective, it had a lot of pros in my mind. And also, no one had ever done prospect development at Weber State University. So I would be able to build it up myself. And that was really an appealing part of that opportunity. So I met some people at Weber State before the pandemic. We kept in touch very sporadically. And then the job opened up in the summer of 21. And I've been there ever since. And it's great, great, great. That is the Weber State slogan. So
You're living the great, great, great life. I love it.
that's right. Yes. Thank you, Jen.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think also getting back to, what makes it different, we serve very different clientele with public higher education, focusing on first generation students. We're trying to become an emerging Hispanic serving institution, which is a federal designation. So again, that challenge of finding donors and prospects that want to support those initiatives, as opposed to grateful patient programming or a very well-oiled reunion and annual giving and leadership giving operation at my previous two employers. Those were really other factors that motivated me.
I'm hearing lots of different skill sets, and I'm curious, along your career, how are you learning these new things? How are you staying sharp and pivoting with your skill sets?
Yes, I would say certainly being in prospect development, having access to Prospect L. If you look at organizationally, APRA, big APRA International, Prospect L, the opportunity to bounce ideas off of colleagues, ask questions. If you look more locally, the local APRA chapters, where you may be able to pose a question directly to someone you trust versus with Prospect L putting it out on an email, on a listserv. So certainly APRA chapters have been another valuable resource for me, whether that's NEDRA, I served on the board for 2 years there in New England, then I would say at APRA Carolinas, APRA Pennsylvania, the Rocky Mountains chapter, APRA Swaro, like a lot of these regional chapters are putting out great content. And those are the ones I gravitate most to because, again, I know people and I trust their expertise. Lots of APRA chapters are doing great stuff. And certainly that's accelerated during the pandemic. So those are the ones that really impact how I stay up to date and stay sharp in my work. But also, I love going on LinkedIn and just being in touch with thought leaders in the field. And it may not be directly in prospect development, but larger social impact. So I would say Louis Diaz of the Donor Participation Project, Mina Das, who is a data strategist, Helen Brown, Jay Frost, keeping in touch with content that people like them, as well as you, Randall Hallett, Nathan Chappelle, The Generosity Crisis, Kevin Fitzpatrick of One Visit Away, a podcast. So people that I don't necessarily know all of them, but I admire their commitment and their passion to share their perspective and to bring up challenges and raise questions in the spirit of how can we add value? How can we think differently about the work we do for the people that we are serving, the institutions we work for, and ultimately the recipients of our nonprofit endeavors.
Well, that leads us right into how you have added another job for yourself. So you're working full time. And then you said, hey, let me found and host a webcast. So you have started People in Fundraising. Why on earth did you do that?
Jen, my wife asks me that question at least once a week as well. So very good question. I had the idea originally as a book. It was going to have a different title. And this was before the pandemic. So wasn't really thinking about video. I was just, going to phone call people and ask a series of questions. And I envisioned it as more of an academic analysis of why people got into fundraising, maybe some best practices, make it topical with trends and such, and then try to then suss out commonalities. I came from a library science background, or I came from for-profit data analysis with a credit card company or whatever, and I found that I could apply those skills to nonprofit work. So a very different vehicle, different anticipated measurement and output. And then the pandemic hit, and we all became accustomed to Zoom for good and for bad. And I thought, this would be a really good time to launch this. I don't know how long it will take. I don't know who will respond well to the idea. And it became more personal, I would say, too, as a result of the pandemic, where we were isolated. And again, getting back to me being more extroverted than I imagined, I thought this would be a great way to challenge myself, to keep that going and connect with people that I don't know, reconnect with people who've been meaningful in my career and or are doing really interesting things. And that was the shift to make this on video. I like the immediacy of it as well. Plus, for good and for bad, you can see flubs, visually, you can see reactions, you can see me, sipping water or, whatever it is, like the human experience of talking to somebody else. And that was why I started it, really. And I think if you dig a little deeper, it goes back in a way to I was a teenager, and I can remember this crystal clear. Like 15 years old, my dad is driving me home from a date with a girl I knew in the marching band. And he's up front and I'm in the back with this date and I'm not saying anything. And after we drop this girl off, my dad's like, you have to talk to people. You have to ask questions because people love to talk about themselves. And you didn't do that. And I'm reading a book. It's actually the memoir of Bono from U2. He said that until we deal with our most traumatic experiences in life, there's a part of us that stays at that age when we experienced that trauma, encountered it. This wasn't a trauma for me, but it was a very pivotal moment of someone, in this case, my father, who I really trusted, saying, hey, I'm seeing something here. And I love you enough to say, I want you to do better. And so in some ways, I'm still that teenage boy in that minivan in life. And it's like, how can I ask the questions, connect with people, get them to talk about themselves? Because it's fascinating. It's just, I love hearing what makes people tick. And I'm excited to talk with you next week, Jen, to hear your experience launching the Prospect Research Institute. And ultimately, that was my motivation and my goal with People in Fundraising is to give people the opportunity to talk about their careers.
That is a great story. And it makes a lot of sense. Many things are started because there's a personal motivation and you're finding an outlet and you found the time. It just all came together. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely.
So before I let you go today, I would love it if you would tell people not just where can they find your webcast, but what if they want to be on it? What should they do?
Yes, thank you, Jen. So my webcast is housed on peopleinfundraising.com. That's my website. I then post there as well as on LinkedIn and YouTube. And I do that every Monday, except for if it's a federal holiday, and there's a lot of them. I'm not the easiest person to find on LinkedIn because my name is very common. There's probably tens of thousands of Tim Wilsons out there. So the best way would be to go to my website. I've got my LinkedIn, my Tim Wilson profile on there, as well as an email address, which is peopleinfundraising@gmail.com. Another way that's a little more roundabout is if you look on my LinkedIn profile, find an interview I've recently posted. If you like and comment on it, I keep the very deliberate track of that for that reason. Randa Hallett, who also has a podcast, said if you're doing this for clicks and eyeballs, then you're doing it for the wrong reason. That should not be a motivation. So that was a great piece of mentoring from him. So yeah, peopleinfundraising.com, peopleinfundraising@gmail.com for the email address. I just want to give people a platform to talk about themselves. I like to think that in 25 or 50 years, maybe their children or grandchildren or other loved ones can see their video of this person in the prime of their life and the prime of their career. And look at that crazy hairstyle. And can you believe that guy is wearing that? Just a different snapshot of how people lived, but also to see how fundraising was in the time that we're working in it versus in the future.
Thank you so much for sharing today, Tim.
My pleasure, Jen. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk and connect with you. And it's been a real honor.
That was Tim Wilson, Prospect Management and Research Manager at Weber State University and founder of the People in Fundraising webcast. Be sure to check out the webcast at www.peopleinfundraising.com. And why not email Tim about being a guest at peopleinfundraising@gmail.com. He would love that. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.